tuning in. Vaibhav, how's it going? So that being said, folks, I'm going to go ahead and get started. So first thing everyone needs to keep in mind in regards to your resume, and the number one thing is that your resume is a marketing tool. Like that's the sole purpose of your resume. So a mistake that a lot of candidates make is assuming that the resume is pretty much all they need in order to land themselves a job. So something, and I actually did speak about this yesterday. So actually, yesterday during the evening, I was invited as a guest speaker for a bridging program at Humber College. So I was speaking to a group of around, I think it was around 20 to 30 people, and I spoke about this particular area in a lot of detail because a lot of you and I get a lot of communication from job seekers and candidates who reach out to me, and just the approach that's being taken is like, okay, here's my resume. Let me know if you have anything for me, or let me know if you feel I'm a good fit. So look, definitely your resume is a very important tool, right? So and in terms of the actual resume itself, you definitely have to make sure it's well written, it's well structured. The grammar, the spell check, all of that stuff is on point and in check, and on in have, and you have checked it out and all that. But that being said, just simply putting your resume in front of someone it might not be enough. It might not be enough to generate further interest, right? And which brings me to my next point. Even the best, the world's greatest resume, if your resume is like an award-winning resume, you invested a lot of time and money into it, it's well structured, it's to the point, it describes all your standout projects. All of that being said, the only thing a really good resume is going to get you ultimately is a phone call, right? That initial phone call of interest, like whether it's from a recruiter, from a hiring manager, whoever, and whatever stakeholder is involved in the particular job search process for in relation to that role. So that being said, my point here is you don't want to just only depend on your resume, because the resume is not going to be enough. So that being said, again, and this is a very important point if you're taking notes, the best resume in the world, the only thing it's going to get you is an initial phone call of interest, right? From the hiring manager, the decision maker, the influencers, the stakeholders, whoever's involved in the process. But beyond that point, it's up to you to sell yourself. Like, and even if, let's say you're saying, hey, Dean, yeah, but how about if I'm working with a recruiter? What if I'm working with a staffing agency? What then? Now, in relation to even a staffing agency, yeah, let's say that you send me your resume captures my attention for whatever reason, and I give you a call. I mean, beyond that point, it's up to you. Like, you still have to sell the recruiter on who you are as a candidate, and your accomplishments, the kind of value you bring to the table. Your resume can't do that on your behalf. Now, there are some situations at staffing agencies where if you're being represented by a staffing agency, they have a very good relationship with their client, is a client they've been recruiting for a few years, and they have a strong relationship. There is that scenario where they can simply present your resume to the client and say, hey, look, this is a candidate. You've been working with us for a while. You know the type of quality candidates we present. Let's just get this person started on Monday. Like, let's skip the interview. Let's get them started on Monday or Tuesday or whenever. That is possible. But that's the exception to the rule, folks. That does not happen. Like, it's not like a frequent, all the time kind of a thing. It depends on that relationship, right? And in your case, if you're applying directly to a position, as far as I know, no hiring manager has ever said, hey, this looks like a great resume. Let's skip the interview. Let's just get them started. In most cases, no. Like 99% of cases, 99% of the time, that's not what's going to happen. Like, what's going to happen is they're going to give you that initial phone call. So the question I have for all of you is, great, you have a great resume. That's a good looking resume. You've done your spell check. It describes all your standout projects. But are you able to handle that initial phone call? Are you able to effectively sell yourself? Because your resume is not going to do that on your behalf, folks. No matter how good your resume is, how nice it is. Again, no matter you got it done professionally and all of that stuff. The point where when it gets to the phone call or the in-person interview, it's game time, man, and you better be prepared for it. You better be prepared to effectively sell yourself as the ideal person for the role, right? For the position that's of interest to you. And this brings me to my next point, right? That you need to be the expert on your resume. Like, it's one thing, and clearly this is why the resume is definitely important. Like the resume is more so like a marketing brochure, right? It's like something you use to assist you in selling who you are as a candidate and as a professional in your field. to the hiring manager, because it's something that you can have them refer to, and then it's up to you, of course, to expand on what's mentioned on the resume, right? And you need to be the expert on your resume. And before I get into that, like something I just wanted to rewind real quick, because something very important came to my mind, which I wanted to signify to you is what captures someone's attention on your resume could differ from position to position, and what the person is looking for. Now, I'll give you a very, very simple example, right? And just my experience as a recruiter. Let's say I have two clients, right? So one client, and okay, let's focus on one position. Okay, I'm not one position, sorry, one skill set. Let's say I'm looking for a Java developer, okay? And I have two clients. They're both looking for Java developers. Now, one client is, and in my conversation with them, they're like, "Hey, Dean, I'm looking for a Java developer. Now we're in the retail space. We run a retail organization, very different space from maybe other industries. So what we're looking for is a Java developer, but they have to have experience in the retail space. Like that's a must-have, Dean. So go out there, let me know who you can find, blah blah blah, whatever, right? So that's their requirement. They're looking for the retail experience. Now the other client also looking for a Java developer, and in conversation with them, they're like, "Hey, Dean, we're looking for a Java developer. That's the main thing they're going to be doing. They're going to be doing hands-on Java development, but we do require someone who's who is more so a full stack developer. So someone who's not working just on the middle tier or the back end stuff, but also on the front end. Like especially if they know any JavaScript frameworks, that would be ideal. We want them to do work on the JavaScript side of things. So we need a full stack developer. So those are the two scenarios, right? This is an example I'm giving all of you. So one client, they're looking. What's their important thing? They're looking for a Java developer, but someone who comes from a retail background. That's number one. Client number two, they want a a Java developer, but they want someone who's a full stack developer and who specifically is well versed with the JavaScript technologies, right? Now, in these two scenarios, and I'm going to give you an example of the thought process of a recruiter. So for the first client, I'm definitely going to be looking for a strong skill set in Java, right? So someone who's a strong Java developer. But I'm also going to be looking on the resume for experience in the retail industry, because remember that client said, "Look, we need someone who has experience working in the retail industry," for whatever reason. Like I'm not sure. This is just an example, folks, right? So, but it is a real life scenario. Like this has happened. So now when I'm looking at the resume, I'm looking primarily for two main things, right? Strong skill set in Java. Number two, I'm looking for retail experience in the retail industry. That's what's going to capture my attention in that resume. Now, position number two, I don't care much about industry, because the client hasn't really stressed the importance of what kind of industry this person has worked on. So I'm looking for two things. I'm looking for strong Java development skill set, and I'm looking for full stack development experience. So I'm looking for the experience with Java, which is the main thing, but also full stack. So I'm looking for the technologies the client mentioned in this scenario, in this case, JavaScript, right? So I'm going to be looking for Java and JavaScript. Like those are the two things that are primarily going to capture my attention on the resume. So because of this, in scenario number two, it doesn't matter what industry you worked in, because clearly that's not important to the client. They're looking for a full stack developer with those specific technologies. So that's what's going to capture my attention on that resume, right? So as you can see in this clear example, in these two scenarios, I'm what captures my attention is dependent on what the needs are, right? And this is the point that I wanted to point out to all of you is whether or not your resume captures attention is dependent on what the requirements or the needs are for the position. Scenario number one, what captures my attention is the Java skill set and the experience in the retail industry. Like those are the main things that capture my attention. Now, in the second scenario, what captures my attention is more so full stack development, Java, JavaScript. Like those are the main two things that capture my attention that will make me want to pick up the phone and give a phone call to the candidates. So, and the reason why I stress why I'm giving you these examples is, again, what captures the attention of the person reading over your resume is highly subjective. It's very subjective. It depends on what the needs are, what that person is looking for. So this is why you don't want to depend only on your resume, because and even before we get to that, you want to be as thorough as possible on your resume. Now, this is why I'm in disagreement with this advice going around, at least in IT, okay? Because I'm as an IT recruiter, I've mostly recruited in IT space. I personally disagree with this advice that you should stick to a one-page resume. If you're a senior level person in IT, like I can't fathom like how that would help you in your job search process. And then it's impossible to mention all these various aspects, tools, technologies, skill sets, industries, specific type of projects. Like how can you mention that on just one page of your resume and appeal to all these individuals that might have different needs in their requirements, right? Because you want your resume to be able to capture the attention of someone with varying needs. Like you want if you have the retail experience, you want to be able to mention that on your resume. If you have the full stack experience, you want to mention that on the resume. Maybe there's certain type of projects that might capture the attention of the person reading over your resume. Now, I'm not saying have a 20, 30, 40 page resume. What I'm saying is you want to be able to include as much as possible to capture the attention of people with varying needs, because those needs are not going to be the same, as I clearly showed you in this particular example. So going from there, this is also why I'm arguing for the fact that you don't want to depend only on your resume. Because look, maybe an organization might be looking for someone with retail experience, but they might be missing out on someone with great talent, right? Great talent. Maybe you're someone who can whereby it doesn't really matter what industry this person's needs are. You can still work the job or work the role. So this is the case where the purpose of your resume kind of hits a glass ceiling, right? Because there's nothing more your resume can do on your behalf. So this is where, folks, you need to be proactive, right? This is where you might have to reach out directly to the decision maker, to the recruiter, to the hiring manager, the stakeholder, whoever it is, and say, hey, look, I do understand that I don't have that retail experience you're looking for, but I have vast experience in all these other types of industries. And you know what? I have been in previous roles where I was in a brand new industry. I was able to pick it up. Hey, let me ask you this: why exactly is the retail experience important to you, right? And if you have that if you ask such a question and have that conversation, it might be determined that, hey, yeah, maybe retail experience is a good plus to have, but it's not really required for the project, given what they're looking for. But you cannot have that conversation, folks, only depending on your resume. Because look, if you only leave it up to someone to just look at your resume and make a decision on their own, you're not in control. You're not able to influence their thought process or their perceptions. And this is why I say, look, the job search process very similar to a sales cycle, and you need to start thinking of yourself, whatever your title, a business analyst, programmer, developer, project manager. Over the course of your job search, you need to think of yourself as a sales professional. You need to sell others on your skill set, despite these certain barriers or blocks or whatever it is. So look, there's pluses and minuses with everything, right? And my point here, what I wanted to make clear on this particular live stream is, and don't, as important as your resume is, I'm not saying, by the way, folks, I'm not saying the resume is not important. Very important to have a well formatted resume, and you want to put in the work to making sure you do the spell check, the grammar check. It's well formatted, it's structured, all of that stuff, extremely important. My point here is, having done all of that, you do not want to depend only on your resume. Your resume will only get you so far. It'll get you, again, like I said, it'll get you that initial phone call. What you do on that phone call is entirely up to you, whether you're connecting with the recruiter, whether you're connecting directly with the hiring manager or some decision maker. So, which brings me to the final point, right? And this is the most important part. You need to be the expert on your resume. Given we've established that the resume is certainly important, given the fact that we've established that you should not depend only on your resume, third point, you need to be the expert on your resume. Because look, when you're speaking to someone over the phone or in person, whatever the case is, ultimately the only piece of documentation they have in front of them that represents you and who you are is your resume. That's the only thing they have in front of you, right? Especially if it's over the phone. So you can expect people to refer to your resume. Now, some of you make the mistake, and this is my experience as a recruiter. You depend so much on your resume that when I ask questions about your resume, you don't know how to explain your experience, and you start that whole awkward thing about I can't remember, that was a few years back. Let me think, and you're wasting time trying to remember things. Which is reasonable. Like, I understand that. Like, maybe you're nervous, maybe you're anxious, but you know what? At the interview, it comes across as a lack of confidence. Because look, folks, all of us have experienced this thing where we meet, and not just in terms of the resume, but just in life in general, where people provide you with a whole bunch of information, but they themselves are not well versed with the information they're presenting to you. So this is why it's important to be an expert on your resume. So before your interviews, you need to be reviewing and refreshing yourself on your most key and crucial standout projects. And you need to be the expert. You need to be able to explain each and every significant project you worked on, and be able to not only explain it but also expand on it as well. So take the time to refresh yourself on your key projects, so that you're able to convey that confidence that you're an expert in your field, which you are. You are an expert, and you don't want to you don't want something as minimal as forgetting to refresh yourself on your projects, or forgetting to go over your resume. You don't want that to get in the way of you getting, you successfully selling yourself as an individual for the role. Because that's like a hair pulling kind of a situation, right? You're like, oh man, if only I practice, I went over my resume and refreshed myself on that project from 2 years back. If only I did that, I would have had a better shot at this interview, right? And you never know, folks, what's going to capture the attention of the person that you're meeting with, especially if you're going in direct. You're not being represented by a recruiter at an agency. They're not able to give you intel on what to expect at the resume. And you might be discovering what the key needs for the role are at the interview itself. And maybe something captured the attention of the interviewer or the hiring manager that was, however, from a project from a few years back, right? Let's say you have, going back to my example, scenario one, the hiring manager is looking for someone, a Java developer with retail experience. Maybe the past 3 years you've been working in another space. Maybe you've been working in, I don't know, the manufacturing sector as a Java developer, but you have retail experience from like 3-4 years back, and hiring manager, then that's what captures their attention. They're like, hey, you know what? I noticed that you were working in retail like 3-4 years back, and I see you mentioned a project here. Can you go over that project? And you're like, oh crap, like I can't remember. That was from 3-4 years back. Like I can't remember the details. And whereas if you were prepared, this is clearly something that captured the attention of the hiring manager, and they're looking for someone with the retail experience, but you're not prepared to speak about it. So this is why, folks, and if you're at like a senior level in your career, especially, I would suggest any standout projects within the past 5 to 8 years, you want to go over those in detail and make sure you refresh yourself on those projects, and be able to effectively sell yourself at the interview. So look, that's my tips and advice regarding the resume. So main thing, folks, your resume is important, definitely important. You want to make a good first impression with your resume. It is that thing that will get you that phone call, that initial phone call. So it is certainly important. It'll get you that initial phone call of interest. Tip number 2, that being said, beyond that phone call, it's entirely up to you. It's up to you to sell yourself as the right person for the role. And tip number 3, be the expert on your resume, because on that phone call, the interviewer, the recruiter is going to be referring to your resume. You want to be able to discuss your background experience based on what they see on your resume. So hope that information was helpful, folks. I do see a lot of comments. Thanks so much, everyone who's tuning in. If you're tuning into the recorded version, I appreciate you tuning in. Again, I do this every Wednesday, folks, at 11 a.m. So mark your calendars. I go over some kind of a job search topic, and then I open it up to a Q&A. So I'm going to get into the Q&A right now. And if I missed anyone's comments, my apologies for that. It's just that I've really gotten into this topic. And I was speaking about this yesterday. I was invited to an online thing with Humber College. They were there for their bridging program. And I spent like a good, I think, 15-20 minutes just on this topic. Firstly, hi to everyone that tuned in. Thanks so much. So I'm going to open up the floor for questions, folks. So let me see here. Okay, so Abhishek Lutra. Abhishek, thanks so much for your comment. So Abhishek is asking, how is the job market these days? So Abhishek, I have covered this in previous live streams, but the job market is definitely, it's not as active as it was, say, a few weeks back. So obviously, this whole situation with the pandemic has affected the available opportunities. But that being said, there are industries and parts of the market where there is an increase in demand. So what you need to do, Abhishek, is research those parts of, like, I'm not sure if you're here in Toronto or if you're overseas, but you want to do some research on how your local market looks like. What are the areas where there's an increase in demand? Those are the industries you want to focus your job search on and see what opportunities might be available within your skill set, obviously. Now, that being said, how this plays out over the next few weeks, kind of hard to tell, because I can't really predict what the transition period is going to look like from when they, get everyone or get businesses back to running as usual. So hope that helps, Abhishek. Again, thanks for your question. Again, hi to everyone who's put in comments in the thing. Sweta says, "Hey, Sweta, thanks so much for tuning in." Sweta says, "True, I have so many resumes, over 200 for the roles we were hiring, and unfortunately, few stood out on a paper. It wasn't resume; it was through LinkedIn and cover letter. My team went through manually pre-screening was hard. We haven't even started interview process. Resume is not enough, folks." Real life, I mean, I couldn't have said it better. A real life example right there. Look at that, 200 resumes, folks. How are you going to separate your resume from 200 other resumes? Given the fact that most resumes pretty much have the same format, same structure, maybe similar. And if it's for if this person, if Sweta is, for example, recruiting on a handful of particular skill sets, how are you going to separate your resume from each and every other resume? Like, there has to be something more than just depending on your resume, folks. So obviously, the resume is important. But look at this situation that Sweta is going through, right? 200 resumes. Like, how can you expect your resume to stand out from 200 other resumes? And what's the guarantee that before they even get through the 200, what if they find the ideal candidate within the first, 20, 30 resumes? Who's to say? Who's to say that's not going to happen? I know that's happened for me as a recruiter. I might give like 200 applications, but you know what? By the time I go through the first 10 or 20, I might find the people I'm looking for. So all the rest of you that are depending on your resume, guess what? Your resume is not even going to be like, no one's even going to get around to looking at your resume, right? Whereas you, as a proactive job seeker, you submit your resume, but you also pick up the phone and you say, "Hey, Dean, just want to let you know, I just applied for your position that you advertised that you were working on. And I just wanted to know, I know you're probably busy. I know you probably have a whole bunch of resumes to go over. You're probably busy. You're probably getting phone calls from candidates. But I did want to let you know that I'm really interested in the position. It caught my attention because of X, Y, Z. And I just want to know, do you have like a minute for me to introduce myself and show you how I can be a great candidate for this position?" How difficult is that, folks? I know it's nerve-wracking. It's easy for me to say that because I talk to strangers all the time as a recruiter, as a sales professional. But if you can develop that ability, you're going to bypass 200 resumes and maybe get yourself in front of the right people, right? And maybe it might not end up with anything, but I do know this: at least you were proactive and you reached out and you bypassed those 200 resumes and you actually potentially spoke with someone who might say, "Hey, you know what? Hey, thanks for calling. You know what? I from what you're saying, I really do like your experience. Let me go ahead and present your resume." What if that happens? What if that happens, folks? So look, perfect example, Sweta. Thanks so much for sharing that. Excellent real life example. How are you going to separate yourself from 200 resumes, folks? Think about that. Think about that for a bit. Simdi says, "Is it okay to include courses you took on the site and don't have a certificate to show for it?" Yeah, absolutely, Cindy. I don't see any issue with that. If you're taking some courses and it's not an actual certification, sure, why not? Because it shows whatever skill set you're looking to improve on or learn about or enhance, and it shows that you're proactively staying in touch with your industry or your skill set, right? You're taking courses, you're taking steps to improve yourself or keep yourself updated. So hope that helps. Yeah, Sweta mentioned again about the 200 resumes. So yeah, pre-screening is difficult, folks, especially if it's a role where you're getting a whole bunch of resumes. And look, don't feel discouraged. I'm just giving all of you the reality of the situation. Like, let's say we cut it. Let's say it's not even 200. Let's say we cut it down to like 100. Let's say not even 100. Let's say 50 resumes. Like, that's still time consuming. And that's still going to be, if you're one of those 50, that's 49 other resumes that you need to set yourself apart from. Don't depend on that, folks. Don't depend on that. Daisy, hey Daisy, how's it going? Great to see you on here. Thanks so much for tuning in, folks. Daisy is another great person to follow on LinkedIn. Love her content, love the stuff that she speaks about. We have a lot of similar ideas and thoughts. So Daisy Wright says, "You are correct, Dean. Most recruiters say length doesn't matter as long as the resume oozes with value. Depending on one's experience and role, a 2 to 3 page resume is the norm." Exactly, folks. So what Daisy's saying here is, look, put more focus on the value you're communicating through your resume. Too many of you are too focused on this. Oh, Dean, my resume is it's more than 1 page. Is that okay? Should it be 2 pages? Is 1.5 pages okay? Is it 2.5? Focus on the value, folks. Like if you're able to convey your entire value, your value in terms of your skill set, the tools, and all that stuff, and your industry, and whatever types of projects you've done. If you can effectively do that in one page, in one page, and it could depend on how many years of experience you have, but if you can do it in one page, hey, who am I to say anything against you, right? But the focus here should be more on the value you can convey on your resume to capture other people's attention. Don't get so caught up on this 1 page, 2 page thing. Like, no one out there is like, if you have a 3 page resume, right? And I'm looking for someone such as yourself, and this whole, let's say this whole 1 page resume rule thing is a real thing. I'm not gonna go over 1 page and say, hey, you know what? I'm not gonna look at page 2 and 3 if page 1 caught my attention. Like, come on, folks, let's be reasonable, right? Like, no one's. I'd be an idiot to do that. Like, if you have a great resume, if you have a great skill set and a great profile, why would I not go beyond page 1 if page 1 caught my attention? I'm gonna want to go through page 2 and 3, maybe page 4 and 5 if you have a 5 page resume. Focus on the value. Focus on capture on whether or not your resume captures attention. So next question.